All right, we're going to go ahead and begin with our next presentation. This is Philip Baxter with his discussion of advancing an open-source tradecraft exploratory lab at JMU.
Hi everybody, how y'all doing today? Good? Excellent. The weather is not ideal, but that's okay. So my name is Philip Baxter. I am an assistant professor with the Intelligence Analysis program here at JMU within the College of Integrated Science and Engineering. And I have set up and working towards advancing what I've called Open-Source Tradecraft Exploratory Lab. Functionally, it is a lab environment for students to get experience in using intelligence tools that are available in collecting data and doing intelligence analysis on real-world current problems. So not writing a term paper, but actually putting together briefings, putting together real meaningful work on that is impactful on a number of different areas, and I'll go into that. So you might be asking, okay, well, what is open source intelligence? Open source intelligence is functionally free data that is out there that you can go and collect. It can be anything from satellite imagery, which I'll give a few examples, to trade data, to home records. It can be any source of data that's freely available, not classified. And why is this important? Is because open source intelligence is really changing how we look at intelligence, who produces it, how it is able to affect the global debates. Data has become democratized in the last 10, 15 years, and we're seeing an ever-increasing number of people that are in this space producing meaningful work, and I'll go through a couple of examples. So getting students used to this type of work, which is critically important to the intelligence agencies to check what they have on the classified side, but also to businesses, right? If you're someone that does supply chain work or logistics, being able to look at supply chain networks or look at what's going on in a particular area will give you valuable insights into how your business is operating and so forth. So academics, activists, journalists, individuals, hopefully, my students are all working in this area, and it's only ever going to grow further. So what do I mean by open source intelligence? Here we have an image of a Chinese aircraft carrier, right? And this is freely available. You can go on and look at this yourself. But getting students to first identify where it is, and then to ask meaningful questions about what we see here, right? What are some of the testable hypotheses that we could go through, right? Why are there no items on the deck? Right? What are these red things? What's these string things here? And we can ask questions about what is going on with this aircraft carrier in this development, if you're interested in Chinese naval activity. Alternatively, we can ask, when is this ship going to launch? Well, we can look that they've got out banners, they've cleared the deck, so it's probably going to be leaving this area soon. So it's set up for some sort of ceremony, right? Likely a launching ceremony. So we can predict that within a matter of a certain time period, this is likely to launch. Here's one that I did looking at in Iran, a suspected Iranian enrichment site, right? This was said, hey, they're doing enrichment here, and we looked at satellite imagery and other data, again, mixed methods, to say, well, based on these different things and what we do expect to see in a site like this, they're not there. It is not this type of site, right? And we can go from there. This is some debris from the conflict in Ukraine. We can look at just images of this, and then using our research skills, research capabilities, identify, well, what is this, right? It looks like just debris or unexploded munitions or partially exploded munitions, and go through and say, okay, well, who manufactured this? Where did this come from? Where was this? Is it used against the civilian population? Other kinds of details that are important for policymakers to know. Lastly, and kind of in the news, we can also work backwards, right? We can say, well, if we're going to be launching a spy balloon over the United States, where would we launch it from? Okay, well, this is what sites that launch blimps look like, right? They're large circles, roughly 200 feet or 300 feet in diameter, and they're able to launch blimps. This is what we'd expect to see. Let's go and look in China and see if we can find it. Oh, yes, we can. We can look and see that here is a launch facility in a province in China, and we can look at other attributes, right? So it may not be just a sports blimp, but it has supporting evidence that is something else, right? It has radio domes, which will feed intelligence to it. It has a hangar. It has fencing. It has high security. It's located near a military installation. All of those things are questions that students would need to ask to confirm after they found something like this. So giving the students skill sets to work on some of these issues. Now, who's working in this area? Everybody, right? The US government works in it just to confirm classified information, but private entities, public entities are all working in this space to use freely available data to come to interesting, meaningful, impactful conclusions. Most of these organizations have their specific niche and stakeholders that they work to, right? One works on North Korea nuclear program, another works on North Korea's economy, one works on China military activity. None really kind of expand beyond one topic area or one, say, analytical method. And so what the lab that we're working on building up is student-driven, right? So topics developed by students. It could be wildlife management. It could be illegal fishing. It could be Chinese naval activity, right? Whatever they're interested in, and finding different methods to attack those problem sets, right? So giving them different tools to work on this in kind of a more comprehensive manner. So what's the vision for the lab? Is to provide space, structure, resources, training on tools, and analytical methods for students, right? To give them not just learning in the classroom on this type of thing, but give them real world experience so that they can build out their resource portfolio. They can build up a portfolio that they can then take to their employer and say, hey, I actually have skills and know this tool. Here's some demonstrations of learning. And then to increase the visibility of JMU, the college, IA, through innovative research, right? I'm sure you all are familiar with in the news of one expert producing this image, and then that just spirals like that. If it's a nuke issue, it's going to be these things. So anytime you pick up a newspaper, you're going to see these organizations mentioned because they have the information and are able to put it out rather than the government's kind of lockdown approach. So what sort of activities are we doing in the lab? We're doing both structured and structured activities. So giving students the opportunity to work in groups, work independently, but then also training on new tools. How do you actually use this tool? And then they can kind of, oh, well, I can apply this tool to this particular problem set. I hadn't thought about that. Providing hopefully research support, doing some really big on publicizing students' work. Coming out of college, these students are going to need that little boost to really make them stand out as candidates, and that's one of the things I'm big on. And then guest speakers to introduce them to kind of new concepts, new areas. So what is needed to succeed? Well, demand for student participation, right? We want students to be involved. We want them to actually want to participate. If they're not going to participate, it's just going to be me in a classroom, and it's going to be boring. And so we have that. We have 20 students already enrolled or signed up, and another 20 that have expressed interest and want to attend. So we already have a cohort of students that are interested and working in this. We need to have infrastructure, right? Every lab has infrastructure. Nice thing about our lab is we just need a laptop, right? So we have the space, we can use classrooms, we can kind of work other areas. So infrastructure really not a problem for this particular lab. We need to have, this thing is working slow, relationships, right? We want to produce things as meaningful to either policymakers or the IC. So we want to have relationships, and we have that, right? I come from working about 15 years in this space. We have other folks that have worked within the intelligence community. We have strong relationships across the interagency and with the private sector working in this. Not a problem. Outward-facing infrastructure, particularly to publicize students' work. It's on our to-do list, right? It's something that we're working on. Hopefully here in the next couple of weeks have set up and able to go. Production time. One of the big things about this is it's production time heavy, right? Students need to identify a problem, need to collect data, need to analyze that data, need to write up reports. It takes time. And so that's one of the things on our to-do list is, building up that production time, building out available resources for them to be productive. And then data. All this data we're talking about is mostly freely available, but it's hard to collect sometimes, right? It's time consuming. And so one of the things that I'd like to do is be able to provide tools and data to students so they can get early wins, right? So you can kind of have momentum build. So data, we have some data, but would like to maybe purchase access to a few things that would help facilitate students getting more early wins. So what's the approach of the lab? Again, student-driven topic generation. I could give them problems all day long. I have a lot of interest areas, but I want them to work on what they're passionate on. This is not just an IA type program. This factors across the university, hopefully. So having faculty mentorship and guidance from other departments is something that we're working towards. Right? This is not just IA, it can be computer science, it can be political science, psychology, sociology, the business school, and providing supply chain or trade expertise, all areas that will be important. We do structured and unstructured time. So structured research time often has, here's our tool, let's learn about this tool, and then here's a data set that we're going to work on, find interesting things within this data set, as well as time for them just to explore, and I provide guidance as they go and help with that. Expert referral and guidance, so having experts provide insights, having them say, hey, this is a question that we're interested in, anyone interested in working on this, and then the students taking that up. So we have a lot of relationships there for our capstone project, but also other organizations interested in working with with the lab on this. I'm big on consensus-based review, so yeah, students can put something out, but does the entire lab agree with their findings? So everything that we'll put out is going to be reviewed by everyone in the lab. Everyone will have buy-in on that before it goes out. And then joint publications. Most of the social sciences do not use a lab type approach. That's usually the physical sciences. And so this is a little different, but I am big on joint publications. So anything that comes out from the lab will be joint efforts. It's not just going to be me publishing on stuff and whatnot. Students will get their names on things. So that's kind of the approach that we envisioned for this. Benefits for students, key here, experience in working with these different research methods. There are tools that we will use that are used within the intelligence community, the private sector, where having that experience with those tools is going to be extremely important when they go to apply for a job, right? Job says, do you have 2 years of working experience with this particular tool so they can get kind of a little bit boost? Actually, yeah, I worked on it in the university and doing these types of projects, and here's what I worked on. Publications for demonstrated analytical capabilities, building portfolios so that they can highlight their expertise in areas, and then hopefully funding so that they can actually have a little bit of time to commit to this. For JMU, really highlighting the interesting work that we're doing here, providing timely insights on critical global problems, contributing to global debates. Our lab found this missile site testing here is an impactful way to highlight the research that we'll be doing. And then building relations with new external sponsors. We have a lot of interest in the lab. A lot of private companies want students that have these skill sets so that they can bring them in and make them productive members immediately. And they're interested in either contributing their tools, right? Hey, have students want to work on this tool, or in collaborating on data set usage. So that's another benefit, not just to the lab, but more broadly to JMU. What's the value to you all, right? That's the big question, right? Is that this is going to produce and is working towards producing innovative and impactful research. And you all get to be a part of that, but also helping students in their careers really get started with a portfolio of work, and then building name recognition for JMU as an innovator in research, specifically in intelligence-related research. So the ask, seeking $22,650. The funds will be used to support student research in conducting analysis and publishing, to bringing in experts to provide training and provide guidance, to purchase data for analysis, again, early victories to build momentum, and then to build out some of the outward-facing infrastructure to really highlight what the organization is doing and some of the outputs. So that is all I have, and I thank you for your time and consideration. Happy to address any questions that you all have.
You mentioned relationships with the IC. Have you thought about partnering with any of the IC agencies?
So we do have established partnerships with a few of them. So we do have agreements in place where we are able to, I think it's called a credo, we're able to have an individual that is tasked with kind of engaging with us. They give us research questions. This is for the larger IA program and for the capstone, but they're much more interested in quicker turnaround projects. So while we do have these capstone projects, they're year-long endeavors. And they're interested in, if you are interested, you can look at terraline.mil. It's the NGAs. They are 2-page briefs on imagery analysis and interesting findings. And they're working towards, okay, we like the capstones, but this is also what we want. And so we have some of those relationships. I'm actually taking students up to Fort Meade here in a couple of weeks. And so we do have some of those existing. Not necessarily for the lab, but definitely through the university.
Is there connection with their internship programs too? I know a lot of the ICs have pretty robust internship programs.
Yeah, the internship relationship is not necessarily, hey, the students get internships, but we do have those folks come on campus and speak to us about internship opportunities and helping to the internship process. We do have a couple of companies that have reached out to me that, hey, students from this lab, if they want paid positions as interns, please let us know. Happy to facilitate that. So yeah, we have folks from the FBI coming, I think in 3 weeks, to address questions on internships.
Your printed material shows that you have would include funding for 2 research assistants.
Yes.
Does that mean only 2 students would be involved in this process?
To start, 2 students would be paid, and that is really to get them to have a lot of buy-in and to dedicate a lot of time. Other students enjoy coming for, right now the setup is on Tuesdays I have kind of an open session and then lab available all day to meet with me. And so the students would have to put in more time doing research, while other students like dropping in for learning about a particular tool or collaborating on a research or asking me research questions on the things that they're doing. So full-time, people like, hey, you have to produce something because you're getting paid, would be 2 to start. We have another a company that has expressed interest in participating as potentially sponsoring students as well, but that's more of a work on our stuff. We have a new tool that we want to provide feedback on and that kind of stuff. So to start 2, hopefully more in the future.
I'm going to hop in here. We've got very popular on the Zoom chat here.
Oh, okay.
Are you looking into detecting adversarial manipulation in the data?
So we have done that. I have done that quite a bit actually with, we have machine learned models that do that. That's not something I'm going to provide to the students. I will help them with data validation, but I will not be teaching the students about that initially. Obviously, there's, for anyone that joins in on lab, we have a session on ethics and a session on I would say operational security, but that's kind of similar, yeah.
Okay. How do you currently store the OSINT collections that you have?
Everything is stored on the cloud and then password protected.
Okay. One more, and then we'll go back to the room here for a second. What are the plans for operational security to ensure that no negative attention occurs for JMU?
Yeah.
Depending on what's being collected and tracked, threat actors won't be so happy if they can attribute it back to JMU.
Nope. And so give students guidance on setting up virtual machines, setting up VPNs so that any research that they're doing is either masked or is not discernible. Most of the students are not going to be some on their own are actually doing this. Most of the students are not going to be tracking down, say, nefarious Russian actors. I do that in my free time, but not the students. I imagine most of the students, or a lot of the students are interested in larger type endeavors rather than finding the needle in the haystack.
All right. And one more, and then we'll go back to the room. What will the students provide that open source tooling currently isn't already doing?
So, open source methods, if we're thinking about it as an analytical method, is not only just about one particular tool. It's more of a mindset, right? It is about, hey, I need to check this source, I need to check this source. This is how I can think broadly. So we don't necessarily think about it in terms of, well, OSINT is just geospatial or it's just this. So giving the students a broader range of capabilities and tools that are available online typically focus in on one particular area, right? So there's a great tool that uses say, trade data and sanction entity lists to identify, when you should not be selling things to certain people. But that's a standalone tool. That would not be good for, say, tracking the new development that a particular company is building in this country, which has linkages to, say, chemical or biological weapons. So it's a different type of mindset and approach. Hands back here. Yes.
Just given the volume of information that's out there now, how would you envision, JMU, differentiating your research from everybody else's?
Yes. So like I said, a lot of the competitors are very stovepiped and focus in on very niche items. And so the students can work on that as well and provide, there's no shortage of research questions that need to be looked at. But guiding them in, okay, well this organization is working on this is what they've done, let's go this direction, let's try something different, right? So we have a team working on looking at tracking illicit shipping, and they want to use machine learning models for satellite imagery. Okay, well that's kind of been done, right? Let's factor in something else. So they're factoring also additional data sets and bringing that in, as well as kind of making a more networked approach. So it's like building on what has been done, but then bringing in different methods.
How is this going to be funded in the future? So if this initial is funded, what happens in the future years?
In the future years, I'm hoping that, well, the funding is just to get us started, right? The funding in the future is, having student funding is great. I love it. It gets building. If it doesn't happen, okay, it doesn't happen. We can still continue to do that. With the lack of infrastructure needed, we're very much kind of low cost to operate. We do have interest from both State Department and another government entity to provide funding for the lab as well. Those just take longer to set up, and hopefully as we get going, hey, this is the capabilities we have, it'll be self-reinforcing. I think I'm out of time, so I look forward to chatting with you all.
We'll take one more.
One more?
There's one more
Please.
question.
Of course, I say that and then there's no more questions.
Yeah. All right. Now we'll pull you with the
All right,
hook.
excellent.
All right.
Thank you all.
Thank you.